Hey everyone. Uh, Sorry I'm a bit under the weather tonight, so if I'm coughing or choking or whatever, you will understand why. Thanks for coming by. Couple news items first. Some folks reminded me that I'd promised that we'd be doing a little daily news roundup at these. So the big news items of the day that I saw are, first of all, obviously the God Emperor issued a number of executive orders, and the big one, the big one that I was most impressed with is the way that he's really taken on the EPA very hard. They announced that the EPA grants are frozen, and not only that, but the agency employees were actually barred from being allowed to speak publicly on the matter. They issued a social media and press blackout, and they also issued some similar orders to the Interior Department and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, no, he did not defund NPR yet. He has not done anything on immigration yet. And that's the second item that I wanted to get to, is that I think that these is a huge organization. The federal government is a huge organization, well beyond the scope that most of us can understand. And so it's not something that you can't expect more than what he's doing already. Would it be exciting if he immediately did get in there and say, yes, we're building the wall, yes, we're going to overturn DACA and whatever. I mean, yes, we'd like to see those things, and those things are important. And I still believe, for crying out loud, the guy hasn't even been in office for a week. If at the end of 100 days Donald Trump has not done anything about immigration yet or the wall yet, then I think that we'll have some cause for concern. But this is just the beginning. And so there's absolutely no cause for concern at this point. In fact, I think that we should be incredibly encouraged by the way in which the God Emperor has really gone to town, going hard with employment freezes on federal employees. He's working hard. He's flipping the unions and moving the unions away from the Democratic Party. I mean, frankly, I think that he has begun harder and faster than anyone since the original 100 days concept, I think, which was JFK, if I recall correctly. I've said that I think, someone said they just read that executive orders on immigration are coming tomorrow. All right, so, people have been freaking out about Trump betraying us and stabbing us in the back and all this sort of thing. I mean, throughout the campaign. And so it's just absurd. The guy has proven again and again that he's going to do what he says. His inaugural speech was fantastic. So it's just give the guy some credit, have some faith. He's hitting it harder and faster than we have any right to reasonably expect. And so just be patient. We'll see what happens. Yeah, and that's something somebody just said. Excuse me. The media is going to paint that picture as long as they can. Obviously, they're going to constantly try to spin it in a way to try to detract support from him. And so it's just something that everybody needs to relax and see what happens. So far, the initial signs are not only good, the initial signs are better than good. They're great. So, one other thing to mention, Ivan Throne, one of our Castelia House authors, the author of 9 Laws, he had offered to host a debate between Jack Murphy, who is one of the new right, alt-light, I wouldn't say anti-alt-right, but he's somebody who's in between the sort of conventional conservative and the alt-right, like me. Ivan had suggested a debate between Jack and Richard Spencer. That sort of, it didn't quite work out for whatever reason, I don't know what, but Jack had accepted. I don't know if Richard was too busy or what. Anyhow, I contacted Ivan and said, hey, if you need somebody to sit in and discuss whether the alt-right is dead or what the differences, the fundamental differences between the alt-right and the alt-right, I'm more than happy to do it. So Jack very kindly accepted, and so So we're going to do that here in the next day or two. So this should be fun, should be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Now, what I wanted to... Somebody said, give me chocolate. Anyhow, bedtime story. Okay, here's the bedtime story. Once upon a time, there was a party called the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party was called that because they supported democracy. And they supported the concept of listening directly to the people rather than and giving the power directly to the people so that the will of the people could be supported directly rather than indirectly through the process of representative democracy. And so that's why we have the difference between Democrats and Republicans, is because Democrats supposedly believe in a more direct democracy, which is why they push for things like lower voting ages, universal suffrage, women's suffrage, getting rid of the direct election of senators rather than having the state legislators select the senators. So that's where the whole idea of Democrat versus Republican came from, because Republicans supported the traditional structure, supposedly, and so forth. Now, of course, that's all largely bullshit, but that's the official story, as it were. And so, but when you look at what the Democratic Party has become now, and you look at what the concept even of democracy, we talk about spreading democracy around the world. The neocons talk about it, right? And yet, they actively, both parties, but the Democrats especially, actively work to thwart the will of the people at every possibility. You look at it in California. In California, they passed a referendum. It was very clear. It won by a clear majority. And yet, the one judge in California was able to completely throw out the clearly expressed democratic will of the people. They're seeing the same thing in Britain right now. The British voted in a referendum. They voted for Brexit. They voted for leave. They voted to get out of the European Union. And then a non-British woman, an African woman with British citizenship, took them to court. And now the Supreme Court has agreed that that the government cannot leave the EU without Parliament doing it first. I mean, these are actively anti-democratic measures. And there's no organization on the planet less democratic than the European Union itself. It's literally run by the unelected EU Commission. So, one thing that somebody said that's the same thing with the Ukraine referendum. People voted against it, were ignored. And so, what we're seeing is that, it's crazy, because you've got these people like Francis Fukuyama who are writing about the end of history and all that sort of thing. And now he's written some great stuff too. But his fundamental thesis, which is that liberal secular democracy is the final end state of humanity, and that no other political progress is possible, and that this is the final stage of human government. That's obviously nonsense, because the more that these organizations claim to represent the will of the people, the more they're actually ignoring what the people actually say. They're more ignoring who the people actually are, and they're trying to redefine people and say that, I can be British if I happen to go live in Great Britain, or if I happen to live in Japan, then I'm Japanese. They're basically, they've elevated magic dirt theory to a absolutely absurd extreme. And so I think that it is time to start calling Democrats out on this. I think it is time to start pushing for getting rid, because as the alt-right, we are not limited by the whole conservative idols and the conservative myths and the romanticized fiction that conservatives are so tied to. And so, we now have the technology to actually allow the people to vote on everything. The people select. People talk about, well, what about the madness of the crowds? And yet, if you look at the history of referendums, if you look at the history of direct democracy in places like Switzerland, if you look at all the state referendums, the various national referendums like Brexit, even all the votes in what a lot of people don't realize is that in the European Union, when they were trying to get through the European, what they called the European Constitution, almost every single nation voted against it in referendums, and every representative government voted it through. So what we know is that the Founding Fathers were wrong. Democracy is actually a better expression. Pure democracy, mob rule, whatever you want to call it, is actually a better expression of the will of the people, more respectful of liberty and so forth, less problematic than representative democracy. And this is a major shift. I mean, it's kind of like with free trade. You know, free trade theory sounded great. I was a free trader. You know, I was a Chicago school guy. But the more we learned about the reality of free trade, once we actually had the possibility, then we got to the point where we realized that everything we thought was wrong. Everything we believed about free trade was backward. Yes, but because of technology, it's because of no, it doesn't have anything to do with white people. You know, the white people screw up free trade just as much as everyone else. And so, you know, one thing that the alt-right has to understand is that it is not all about race. Okay, race is an important element, but it's only one element. Okay, it's an important element. It is in some ways a definitive element, you know, because you can't substitute a population that's 104 average IQ for a population that is 85 IQ. But regardless, we need to understand that these mythologies that we're subjected to, we are subjected to mythologies on the right every bit as much as the left. And so, and it's important for us, if we're going to understand the truth, if we're going to win, then we need to be more focused on reality. We need to not be inclined to our own myth making and believe our own bullshit. Okay, so, but getting back to democracy, this is a powerful weapon and a powerful mean to call out the Democrats every time, because they're constantly talking about the people, the voice of the people, you know. And so this is a great way to say, hey, look, you know, we are the true Democrats. We believe in direct democracy. We want to give the people the actual voice. Think about it. How many people, so the Civil Rights Act, right? Would that ever have passed if the entire population had voted on it? Would the USA have ever gone into Syria or, blown the occupation in Iraq and so forth if everyone had voted on it? Of course not. You know, these are all things that can only be done. On the Trump question, they would point out that direct democracy would have given us Hillary. Not necessarily, because you need to keep in mind that the campaigns that were run on the basis of the rule system. I mean, an NFL team is not going to play the same way in 2017 as it did in 1950 because the rules are different. Donald Trump would have run a very different campaign if he was running on if it was a popular vote wins. So here's a good question. Even if true, isn't this another form of Democrats are the real racists? No, absolutely not, because it's not about name calling. It's about actually pushing for a measure. This is a strategic move. It's not even a tactical one. It is pushing towards empowering an electorate that is much more likely to favor what we want than the representatives are. It's easy to buy a representative. Under the current system, it's trivially easy. That's why representative democracy is so favored by the globalists, because it's very easy for them to buy politicians. That's why in Italy here, the prime minister recently tried to create a new, they tried to force some constitutional reforms through because it would make it easier for them to control the central government and therefore ram through whatever they wanted. And the people, it had to be approved by referendum. It was approved by the government, but the people voted it down. It's too easy to buy politicians. I mean, this is what's important. The rules that we think we have, many of them were just ideas. I mean, you talk about direct democracy, and you hear, your average conservative, your average Republican will immediately spit out, "Oh, mob rule is bad." Well, why? They say, "Well, the founding fathers said so because Greece." Well, in Greece, it was very different. That was over 2,400 years ago. It's very different then. Things have changed, and what we now know is that representative democracy is actually worse for freedom. It's actually worse for nations. It's actually worse for all the things we value. It's worse for Christianity. It's worse for everything than direct democracy. And because the will of the people, because democracy is still such a powerful meme, it is something that we can take advantage of by calling for direct democracy. And therefore, rather than saying Democrats are the real racists, what we can say is the alt-right truly represent democracy. The alt-right truly represents the will of the people. The alt-right truly represents the will of the nation. So, excuse me. Anyhow, so that's my idea for today. Think about direct democracy. If you doubt me, look up what the founders said about mob rule, and then look up the history of, especially look up the history of national and state referendums compared to what the legislatures did. Yeah, somebody said this, and it's absolutely right. We have the technology and we have the proliferation of information to make direct democracy workable. It already works in places like Switzerland. And it is viable, and it is vastly preferable to representative democracy. So that's it for today. And I'm excited to hear about this. I'm excited to hear about these executive orders relating to immigration. So we'll have to wait and see what that brings us. But have a good evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.